Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Monday night edition of the People Show. I'm Mark Wallace, your host, and for difficult, there we go. Welcome to the Monday night edition of the People Show on intellectualradio.com, Instagram, Facebook, and on YouTube. I'd like to always ask you, sometimes I forget to do it, to please go to my YouTube channel. There is no prescription or subscription cost. Just like to ask you to register there, to get other people that you know in your social networks to join the program. We really want to get our viewership and listenership up, and for having more people to participate in the program. We also have our call-in number where you will be able to call into the program at 951-221-8221 is our call-in number. And we have a great program lined up for you. Coming up a little bit later on in the program, we're going to have two seasoned journalists that are going to be joining us, Eric Diggin and, of course, Nicki Mayo. Both of them are going to be joining us in the 7:30 bottom of the hour to talk about what's happening with Blacks in media, Blacks in mainstream media, and Black-owned media. And, of course, what we see happening with the Trump administration in his attack and trying to quash people in the media, and what they think that is happening in the media and what we should be doing in terms of protecting our own. You know that we lost some people who have left the anchor ship. Lester Holt just announced that he left, and Joy Reid was fired from MSNBC. Don Lemon from CNN some time back, and then was hired by Elon Muskrat, and Elon Musk eliminated him. I'm not sure that that is, in having conversations with others, that that is all bad. Obviously, we do need to have African American people in mainstream media. And when we say the mainstream media, we're talking about the CBS's, NBC's, and ABC's, which are our mainstream outlets. We do need to have that kind of representation there. And how we can protect them, obviously, and how we can support them is to make sure that when they are on, we are watching those programs and flooding those programs by the gazillions. We go to the movies more than anybody else. And the statistics just came out, the ratings came out, statistics in terms of who watched soap operas, found out that soap operas are viewed, 70% of all soap operas are viewed, 70% of their audience is from the Black community. So we do have the power, and certainly we watch television, we go to the movies, but we have to be more engaged in watching those that we have in our news media outlets, because our news outlets provide us with information, but they provide us with information that may be skewed. Please, I need you to hold on for me just for 1 second. We're having some to make sure that we don't have the kinds of interruptions. My apologies there. But at any rate, it's very important for us to make sure that we support our own. Now, I'm going to have I want to have some heart-to-heart conversations with us tonight, so that we are still having these issues. But I want to have some heart-to-heart conversations with us tonight to ensure of what our responsibilities are in terms of making sure that we do what it is that we are supposed to be doing. And to address these issues. Now, I contend that our greatest problem is the lack of engagement. The lack of engagement, that we are not participating at the level that we need to be participating in order for us to get the kinds of outcomes, or at least to be able to change conditions that we need to change politically. In order for us to change the social conditions, we have to be engaged in understanding what are the driving forces. And the driving forces for those changes are a multi-layered of areas that we have to participate in. We have to participate in our political process. We can't just sit around and have these bar stools or couch conversations about certain things and then throw up all kinds of conjecture that are not based with any type of sound factual information or data. That's not how we deal with conditions and deal with situations that we have to deal with. We have to be fact driven. We have to have factual information. I was at a meeting on this past with a group of Black men. One of them, without even asking, based on the information that they said. Now, this is a group of Black men that I met with on Saturday. And one of them tried to assert to me that, and these talking points that he had led me to know that he was aligned with Republicans. Now, let me just say to you, I don't know how any Black person is aligned with Republican ideology, because Republican ideology and the philosophy of Republicans does not bode well for the support of what people from the Black community need, from education to economics. There's nothing within the fabric and the foundation of the Republican Party that governs or even proposes towards the Black community. It just does not happen. It just doesn't happen. Let's see. I'm responding here. So it just doesn't happen for the Republican, for Blacks in terms of the Republican Party. And the other reasons is you can look at the Republican Party and see who they cater to. I wouldn't even say cater to, but see who is in the Republican Party, like people like um, the guy from Tim Scott, right? Tim Scott, because Tim Scott has done well or is doing well. I don't know, doing well with his business in South Carolina. He somehow has aligned himself with the Republican Party because he has this ideology that you have to pull yourself up by your own bootstrap. Well, that's easy to say when you have some boots that have straps on them that you have a foundation for. However, you cannot measure the success of overall success of Black people by using the hole in the fence type of philosophy. And what I call the hole in the fence type of philosophy is that you try to pick out people and to suggest that people like Michael Jordan or Oprah Winfrey or LeBron James or who else is there out there? Shaquille O'Neal. You try to pick out these Black people who were fortunate enough. They worked hard, but they were fortunate enough to get into a position that thousands upon thousands of other people who have just as great of talent as they do didn't have the opportunity. But they got there and they succeeded. But that is not a benchmark for suggesting that the ideology of so-called conservatism is a platform or a foundation that we can subscribe to. Because there's nothing that comes from the Republican Party. And I've said it, and I've challenged people. Bring me one piece of legislation that the Republicans have championed on behalf of Black people, and bring me a piece of legislation that they've championed that they haven't even compromised, like the Voting Rights Act. Now, they didn't champion it. The Voting Rights Act was not championed by Republicans. The Voting Rights Act was championed by Democrats, and it was led by Democrats in the majority when they were in the majority in Congress. So, but he tried to challenge me on that. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was championed by Democrats. It was not championed by Republicans. Somebody tried to say to me that this legislation was championed by a Republican. And I asked him, who was the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act championed by? He could not provide me with that information. Voting Rights Act of 1965. The Voting Rights Act of 1965, that federal legislation that was put in place. It was signed into law by Lyndon Baines Johnson, but it was proposed by John F. Kennedy in 1963. John F. Kennedy was shot and assassinated. But the Voting Rights Act was proposed by John F. Kennedy, led by the majority leader in the Senate. Now, it was supported by the Republican minority leader at the time that supported the Voting Rights Act. But guess what happened? The conservatives gutted the Voting Rights Act at the Supreme Court with Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas. So They took that back. Then you have Republicans who have proposed recently 263 bills of voter suppression bills, all proposed by Republicans called voter ID bills, but they were really voter suppression bills, where you have people down in the South that could challenge, an individual can challenge someone else's voting registration. They can literally challenge someone else's voter registration. One person in Georgia challenged 30,000 registered black voters in Georgia, who all happen to be black, that they purged more than 1 million people from the voting voters registration. Now, some would argue this could have played significantly in the loss of the election for Kamala Harris. Maybe it did, but also things contributed to the loss of Kamala Harris is because of the sick. Now, and I know that some people are going to have a problem with me, but I was on a live earlier with Brother Anthony Ankrum from my home town down in Miami. He's assistant minister at assistant pastor at Second Baptist Church. But he and I think a lot alike about what has gone on and what we see happening. I had a few weeks ago, and a few programs ago, I had Greg Pallas on talking about what happened. This is a person who does forensic audits of elections all around the world. And you can go on and you can take a look at on his website, gregpallas.com, and he shows you the documentary of just what happened. But in that happening, yes, Republicans, conservatives do all that they can to stop black people from participating in elections. It is one of their mantras. It is a part of the conservative movement. It is a part of their movement that was founded by the founder of the conservative movement. If you don't believe me, you want me to show you what their philosophy is? I'll show you what their philosophy is. I'll show you what their philosophy is and what they believe. And I'm going to remind us of this, because if you think that lining yourselves up with the maggots and the MAGAs and the Republican Party is the answer, you are seriously misinformed and confused. There's a man by the name of Paul Weyrich, who is the orchestrator and the founder of the conservative movement. And he went around the country in the early 1980s telling Republicans that the way to their success to winning election is to suppress the vote. This is Paul Weyrich at the Southern Baptist Convention talking to conservatives, telling them about what their plan has to be in terms of them winning elections. And it is not about everybody participating in election. Take a look.
Now, many of our Christians have what I call the goo-goo syndrome. Good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
That's what he says. Their leverage goes up whenever the voting populace goes down. So what do? They try to do all that they can to suppress people from participating in elections. What have they done recently? They have gone out in these Republican-led legislatures and have passed more than 262 voter suppression bills. That makes it much more difficult for people to vote or prevent people from being able to participate in the electoral process. So those of you who identify with these Republicans is beyond me. How any of you identify with Republicans. Any of you can identify with these Republicans, because their ideology is not to include you in the electoral process. Donald Trump, who went on lying about he knew nothing about, Project 2025. Well, there was an undercover investigative reporters that had a meeting with the chief author of Project 2025. And he thought that he was meeting with some Republican donors. And they did this undercover investigation of Russell Vought, who put together and is the lead author of Project 2025. He was the secretary of OMB in Trump's first term. Trump tried to nominate him for secretary of OMB this term. I don't think that he quite got confirmed. But this is what he said, his answer to the question about Donald Trump distancing himself from Project 2025. This was their strategy.
Notwithstanding, I expected to hear 10 more times from the rally, the president, distancing himself from the left's boogeyman of Project 2025.
Yeah. And you're not worried about that?
I'm not worried about it. And so I see what he's doing is just very, very conscious distancing himself from a brand. He's very supportive of what we do, and know that we have all manner of things that we do that's, even unrelated to Project 2025.
Sure.
There you go. All right. So this is a part of their plan, is for him to say he knows nothing about it and he doesn't agree with some of the ideology of it. But we now know that that is true, because that's exactly what they are attempting to do, and they are doing in terms of trying to implement Project 2025. We see it happening throughout the threads of what's happening between Elon Musk and the dismantling and firing of civil servant workers at every level that are unconstitutional. We now have seen that the president has now defied a federal court order and trying to use as an excuse that the planes were in the air. Well, there's an investigation and a hearing that is going forth about that to see whether or not those planes had taken off after the order was given, or if in fact they were already in the air. But it doesn't matter, because the law is very clear that law that they used in the 1800s, in the 1800th century, that talked about that the president has the power to deport if in fact we are in war with that particular country. We're not at war with El Salvador, and we certainly aren't at war with Venezuela. So we have a president, which is no surprise because he is a criminally convicted, 34-time criminally convicted felon, is what we have as a president of the United States. And many of you thought that this was a better choice because you didn't think that the black woman was black enough, or you don't think that a woman should be president of the United States of America, or you didn't think that Kamala Harris should be president, but you think that what we have now is better than that alternative. How's it working out for you? Are you happy with the way things are going? Is that what is this what the change is? Is this the change that many of you that were unhappy with the Democratic Party, unhappy with Joe Biden, with all of the things that Joe Biden did, that black communities and black people will benefit from, and were benefiting from the policies that he got passed, he and Kamala Harris got passed, were much more aggressive and aggressively, disproportionately helping black students, the Pell Grants, the forgiveness of student loan debt forgiveness, where you have Kamala Harris, who drafted the language that put Pell Grants into that policy, because 97% of all blacks who go to college use Pell Grants. And because Pell Grants were a part of that policy, it disproportionately will help to alleviate millions and billions of dollars in debt for black students going to college to get an education. You didn't think that was good enough. You didn't think it was good enough that Joe Biden put more than $16 billion, $17 billion into historically black colleges and universities, combined more than all of the other presidents combined. You didn't think that was good enough. You didn't think that it was good enough that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris administration was able to put the $6,000 child tax credit in that cut child poverty in half, that helped more than 5.5 million black families as a result of that policy. You didn't think that was good enough. And you think that the Republicans are going to do anywhere close to that. But you thought that what we have now is a 34 criminally convicted felon was a better alternative. This is what you thought. That's better for the country. Then you have some people who are saying, well, you know, I voted for Donald Trump because I didn't like the idea that they were supporting transgender playing in high school athletics. Playing to the fears of the dog whistles. Do you know that there are more than 7.5 million student athletes playing in high school? 7.5 million, more than 7.5 million. Do you know how many transgender athletes there are? Do you know how many there are? 10. You all playing to these dog whistle fears and having these purist attitudes and ideologies, that you thought that supporting a man who was found liable for sexual assault, who was convicted of 34 felonies, that we have a felon as occupying 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Some of you confused Black folks and Hispanics thought that this was a better alternative than voting for the Black woman who you all said wasn't Black enough. The woman who crafted part of the language that is for giving billions of dollars in student loan debt for Black students, who was brilliant enough to make sure that they got the language of Pell Grants into the policy. But you all didn't think that this would be better. You thought that they were going to ruin the country. What do you think is happening now? You think that the country is being put into a better situation now that we have, I think now, more than 100,000 people who've been disbanded and dismissed from their civil servant jobs? Not just 100,000 people being dismissed from the civil servant jobs, but the 100,000 people who have been dismissed from their civil servant jobs were doing very important jobs, providing service to millions and millions of Americans who need those services, like people to get their Social Security checks, people to get their Medicare and Medicaid benefits in order for them to just live. But you all thought that this was a better alternative. I was in a meeting with some Black men the other day, and like I said, I knew just by his talking points that he was aligned with the maggots and the so-called Republicans. But I put him to a challenge. I said, we have about another hour to go with this meeting. I'm going to give you an hour to find me one piece of legislation, not two, one piece of legislation that the Republicans have proposed and passed on the behalf of the average working man or woman, or on behalf of the average Black person in this country in the past 50 years. Just one. I'm going to give you an hour to do it. Well, I've been challenging people with that for the past 15 years, and they still have not been able to bring it to me. Of course, they try to bring me some information that's not correct information, and we had to, run the gamut on them to show them what the real facts are. My point is this. I don't know what it is or what it's going to take to unravel the misinformed and to deal with whatever this toxicity it is, with this purist attitude that people are having to saying what the Democratic Party hasn't done anything for us. That is just patently untrue. It's the Republicans who haven't done anything for you. And the two times that Republicans have supported legislation on behalf of Black people, they now have compromised them. That is the Voting Rights Act. And then back when we had 12 years of Reconstruction back in 1865, they took that away from you. They've gutted the Voting Rights Act. They've passed more than 200 voting suppression bills called voter ID bills. So I'm confused at what your confusion is to think that these parties or these people on that side have the best interest for Black people in mind. We're going to continue this conversation a little bit later on. We are going to pivot here because I see one of our guests that showed up in the green room, and we are going to be talking about something that I think that is very critical that's happening. Again, that is largely being pushed by people on the Republican side, and certainly not. And if it's not being pushed by people on the Republican side, it's people on the Republican side that are not standing up for the people of the press. And so I have two people who are coming on to speak with us about this. We want to talk about what the role of Black journalists are, what their role is, and what we should be doing in terms of supporting and protecting them. And Black-owned media. What is the status of Black-owned media, and what should Black-owned media be looking towards and doing in order to make sure that our voices are heard and protected? The other thing that we want to talk about is some noted people that we know, Don Lemon and recently Joy Reid and Lester Holt has announced that he's going to be stepping down from his primetime role as anchor on NBC News. Joy Reid was let go a couple of weeks ago by MSNBC. Don Lemon was let go by CNN and then also let go by Elon Musk after an interview that Elon Musk, I thought that he was, I guess, made to look bad by Don Lemon. But these people have their own spaces. We want to talk about that. Is that a plus? Is that a good thing? I think it's a good thing, but do we need both? Do we need to make sure that we have Blacks in mainstream media as well as Black-owned media? We're going to be talking about that. My guests who are experts in this area are going to come on and talk about this. We have joining me now is a multimedia journalist, Nicki Mayo of the Nicki Mayo News LLC. She is joining me, and we're going to be joined by Eric Deggans in just a few minutes. Nicki, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Mark. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Awesome sauce. Okay, great.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. So with all that has been going on, and of course, you know, our country is at chaos right now, and we have a multiplicity of areas to cover. But one of the areas that have been under attack is Blacks in mainstream media. So we've seen the likes of Don Lemon being let go from CNN, and recently Joy Reid from MSNBC. And then, of course, we heard the announcement of Lester Holt stepping down from his anchorage at MSNBC. Can you kind of give us what your take is on what is happening to Black journalists in mainstream media?
Yeah, sure. Anytime we have a changing of the guard in the White House, there's a trickle-down effect that happens in American newsrooms. And oftentimes you will see major networks kind of, bend the knee toward the current administration. That doesn't mean that's necessarily what happened here, but, history has kind of showed us that as a pattern. It's because you're trying to vie for the eyeballs of, or the clicks of whoever is the prevailing audience. And, I think we saw this again in 2016. There's been a constant rotation of extremely talented folks. And again, we're looking at national news organizations where they're very prominent figures. And I'm all for it. I'm a Delta. I love Sora, Joy, and Reid. But there are just so many journalists across the board, whether they work at the national level, the local level, the hyper local level, that are working, arduously trying to get you all information, the general public. And it does kind of hurt as you watch this turning over. You're like, okay, so news organizations are supposed to be independent of politics. We're supposed to actually be more of a watchdog organization, making sure that politicians are being held accountable. They call it the fourth estate. So it does hurt when you're looking at news organizations appear to be saying, okay, well, what can we do to get the audience of the GOP versus the Democratic Party versus what can we do to inform the working public? They will never say that, but it really does look performative in these top Black names being kind of cut very quickly. I followed Joanne Reid's career for a long time. She was at the GRIO before, another Black press organization, by the way, which is great, but has been rife with a lot of budget cuts, funding, keeping people working. It's cheap to do opinions. Opinions are behinds. Everyone has one. But when it comes to actually efforting out journalism, the who, what, when, where, why, working, boots on the ground, as we all seem to say right now, that costs money. And Black press organizations tend to really suffer when it comes to that. Historically, I don't know if your viewers know this, or hopefully they recognize this. We're in the midst of a celebration of 198 years of the Black press right now. It was the March 16th of, let me see if I can get that date there. March it was definitely the 16th. There was a whole like Black Press Sunday at churches and things. But in 1827, it was the Freedom's Journal, and it was the very first Black owned and operated newspaper in the United States. So we're trying to celebrate the Black press, but it needs to be more than, oh, I remember this newspaper that was around when I was a kid. It needs to be, are you supporting it? It needs to be, are you clicking on their stories? Are you sharing their stories? There's some dominant, well-funded, different profit model, but Black press organizations that are that are digital, and they need our support. And, let's be straight, the Joanne Reeves, the Don Lemons, the Melissa Harris Perry, they're great. They're awesome. They're important, impactful voices, but they were also getting paid a lot more than your average local news organization person. So, if I'm getting paid $4 million a year, it's going to hurt to not see my face on air, but financially, I'm going to be all right. We're losing so many talented Black journalists because the organizations can't pay. They can't keep them on. And when it comes time for cuts, it just seems that they just happen to be the ones on the chopping board first. And they were not the last hired. So why are they the first fired?
Well, and I was talking to, to another journalist here who I work with very closely in Chicago. And one of the things that I was in on a panel, sitting on a panel, and the question was asking, the question was raised, does it matter, right? Does it matter that Joanne Reed was dismissed? Does it matter? Of course it matters. And one of the things that was brought up was that, we see people making all kinds of comments on social media and TikTok and all that. That does nothing for Joanne Reed, right? What does for Joanne Reed is to watch the show. So what becomes the responsibility of the viewers, of us as viewers, when we see that we have Black people in prominent positions in mainstream media? We've got to pay attention to when they're on the air. We've got to watch in order to protect them from being the first to be fired or to be cut when there has to be cut, is to make sure that they're not the ones that are cut, that their shows are highly rated like any other show.
Yeah, it's the responsibility of the growing Black population, but frankly, everyone in general, because of Black history is American history in this country, is to support these news organizations and these programs when they're on. The however, though, is understand what is monetized, because clips that are viral clips of an exchange floating around on social media networks, those are great, but a lot of times people are just ripping video and breaking all types of FCC, codes to throw up a clip up. So you're not even getting the numbers to the originator. Like there is an MSNBC social media account. There is a CNN social media account. There is even a Fox News social media account. Are you going to those? Are you clicking on those? Are they seeing the actual, I don't want to say ratings in this case, because in this case, you're looking at like, what are the unique users? How are people coming to this? Are you seeing those numbers there? Because let's be straight, cable news, I teach college students, they're not watching anything outside if I make them watch, right? That's not how they ingest news content, but they will go on social media. They will follow certain news organizations on social media. So diversifying, like, what is your palette? What are you taking in? And frankly, are the numbers registering? I have a unique background where I've worked at all of the different mediums, including doing digital for historically Black newspaper, the Philadelphia Tribune, and having the chance to look at the numbers, what does well online, and think about how old think about how old a newspaper is like that. Like you're talking, this is NNPA, this is part of the big network of 200 plus Black press newspapers. People have to pay attention to those too. And when they put content out there on social media, share those too. Share more than just the viral argumentative clips. And let's be straight, some Black press organizations have gone that route in an effort to try to like get numbers. And it does hurt when you see like this is the level of downgrading you're doing to try to stay relevant and get those numbers in. But that's how they're able to sell themselves to potential sponsors. I really don't expect anybody under like 35 to be saying, oh yeah, I tune in every afternoon or evening at 7:00 to watch whoever show. I love Abby Phillips, but I can't tell you that my students are going to be watching that at like whatever time it comes on. the programming, I'm sorry, not the programming, the appointment television is not really happening. And I was very proud, by the way, of all the aunties and uncles that were like, rallying around Joyanne Reed. I was like, oh, look at them go. I'm like, I like that. I was like, I'm here for it. But there are other news organizations, y'all, and they all need your support.
No, I agree. But I think that, when we were younger, certainly when I was younger, I'm 64 years old, that
you look like you're 34.
every household, right? Thank you. Every household, including ours that we went to, on the coffee table was an ebony jet. I'm from Miami, Florida, a little small black town in Miami, Florida. Every household that I can remember, I knew nothing about Chicago. Every household that I went to,
Ebony and Jet.
Ebony Jet, the magazine, was in every household, which tells me that Black people, regardless, they made sure that there was that they had a subscription to support Ebony Jet, right? Even though, they're no longer with us. But don't we have to have some type of drive like that, in terms of, even, obviously it has to be more contemporary to where we are today, but to support our Black journalists, to support our Black-owned mediums, because if it's not for Black eyeballs, right, or Black support, most of our Black media is not going to survive, because white mainstream media is not going to support our outlets.
We have to be very intentional. Like, I remember how viral everything that came off of Shannon Sharp's podcast, talk show, sipping cognac, whatever that thing is that he does. But frankly, it's giving Zeus Network. It's not giving, this is a journalist. In fact, several times he said, I'm not a journalist. I'm just interviewing people. And the level of negligence that I've seen on that show alone, and I've been very vocal about it, I'm like, somebody's going to get sued. But I get it. We want to be entertained and get some information off of it, but then kind of categorize that as long as journalism goes. I'm okay for infotainment. I'm okay for entertainment. I'm not okay for you having absolutely no Black news, no Black press like source. You got to mix it in there, just like you mix in vegetables, because if you're not, all of your news, if you're not mixing it in, you're going to have a lot of news that is so coded mainstream that you're going to start to, frankly, hate yourself. Too much of mainstream news is super steeped in anti-Blackness. And I don't think that's healthy for any person of color, but any Black person to really be taking in, because it's like Malcolm X, like, who taught you to hate yourself? But if all you're seeing is a Black face or Black skin associated with negative things, even when we do politics, look at this Black politician, ooh, they embezzling. It's like, I cover politics since like 99. They all embezzle. Sadly, they all are like, I hate to say that's not nice, but too many politicians are fraudulent and do bad things. It cannot only be coverage of when a Black person does a bad thing. It needs to be balanced out. But I have physically been in newsrooms where the directive was find the dirt on the Black person of the candidates. And you're scratching your head like, what? And you mentioned Florida, by the way. I worked in Sarasota for about a year and a half, almost 2 years. And that's the place where, when I write my book, that's the one that told me there's no Black national anthem to take it out of my script. So we're constantly fighting for our lives in newsrooms. Yes. They're quick to let us, like, they're attempting, I hate to say they, because I always want to identify. Too many times there are news managers that are intent on our history having an erasure and our culture having an erasure. The default being to mainstream, but mainstream is coded as almost like a white is right thing, like your parents told you. And that's not cool. That's not accurate. And if America is supposed to be this whole little melting pot situation that we were sold, then we should be embracing diverse voices, as well as the stories. Like, we need to have that diversity in a newsroom. Erasing it does not serve well, because that's an attempt at revisionist history. Right. It's an attempt at erasure of a culture and experience. So no, it's our responsibility as consumers to support Black press organizations. But I'm going to be honest, because I know you mentioned Ebony and Jet, and I love them, and I grew up on them too. However, they got to pay people. Black press does not give you a sign off to, like, not pay people.
Well, that is correct. Is that we certainly have to prioritize what's important, right? And
Yes.
you have to compete, and that means that you do have to support people, and you have to pay people in order to keep them there. But I don't think it's a but. I think it's both. I think,
Yeah.
yes, we have to find ways to capitalize, and we have to find ways to make sure that you can keep great talent and that you can pay them. But we also have to find ways to make sure that culturally that we have to support these mediums so that black meat outlets and black medium can pay people
And
and pay people well.
there are some Black press organizations that are in the digital world that are capitalizing off of nonprofit. Like they are being supported by grants or by nonprofit initiatives, the solutions-based journalism, and I love that. Like the fact that we have Michael Harry just came out with the Contraband Club, and that's got like a bevy of just super talented journalists. So you get opinions as well as journalism at the same time. Capital B has been amazing when it comes to like covering Black people, not just in Atlanta, but like Atlanta, Gary, Indiana, DC. Like they're trying to branch out as much as they can. We need those type of journalists out there that are fearless but funded. Like you can't be fearless and broke. It doesn't work together. They got to be able to take care of themselves. And frankly, as we, you kind of mentioned before I got on here about the media landscape, and frankly, the environment that we're all existing in right now, it's hostile. It's very anti-Black. It's frankly, you're just missing a couple of hoods on some people. It's scary right now. This is not what I think my parents, who are boomers, anticipated me living through. But here we are, right? So in this type of a landscape, people need to get paid so they can take care of themselves, because life is going to continue even if we're having a very tumultuous and hectic and hostile time in this country.
Well, what part of that problem is when, and this all started back under the George W. Bush administration, when they deregulated and allowed for conglomerates to just buy up all kinds of media outlets, when before it was restricted, and now you have, conservative-owned conglomerates that own more than 1,000 outlets, so they have a majority of the outlets. So that also contributes to this hostile environment, to saying, hey, we can control who comes in and who stays out.
Well, you know that quote about whoever controls the media controls the mind?
Right.
So that's where we are right now. And frankly, that's where we've been for a minute. I don't think Joe Blow media consumer realizes how many news organizations, like local news organizations, are literally owned by one like very right-leaning company. They don't realize that. All they know are, I hate like that people's minds default to the way elections go. They know general elections. They know president. I'm like, do you know your council members? So bringing that back to media landscape, you know that, okay, Fox News means it leans very right. MSNBC means it leans very left, and CNN is somewhere in the middle. Okay, but when you turn on your local news organization, are you picking up on the fact that some of these people are literally running pieces on like burqa bans and like, Black lives don't matter? And it's kind of like you need to start looking at those opinion pieces, and that's for TV. You should be able to identify what is the leaning of any news organization, and it is freakishly scary how many are owned by openly right or left leaning news companies. It should never be that way. That is not our job. Our job is just to give you information. It is not to tell you, hey, go blue, go red, go what is independent green, go green. Like that's not our job.
Right. Well, but that was the intention of the conservative movement in the early 1980s, was that they were set out to control the media outlet, and we saw it happen. And when they unleashed, I forget what they were called at the time, but when they unleashed, I forget the name of it, but they bought 970 radio stations when the George W. Bush signed off on that deregulation. They bought more than 900 radio stations around the country, and this was a right-leaning conservative outlet, right?
Yeah.
And so you saw whenever you would have an entertainer that would say something that was in opposition to somebody conservative, they stopped playing their music.
Yeah.
Right. And then they would have to come out and retract what they would say. That's not what we call a democratic process or democracy.
Yeah. I need people to be more conscious about their media consumption. I'm trying my best, like as I do these career days to get them younger. I teach at the college level. I'm trying to like educate them so they can be the cool person at the coffee party or the cocktail party and tell their friends like, here's how we evaluate whose information we're getting and how to find the cleanest information possible. I get that folks love opinions, but I'm like, I need you to recognize when you're being fed a lot of opinion.
Yes.
And not getting any meat and potatoes. And I even had like a cool, I think it was like a New Yorker image that showed like prime cuts, like a butcher shop, prime cuts news, and it had news on it. And then it had like, sloppy joes and like, the burgers and stuff over here and hot dogs, the over processed, lots of salts and preservatives, but definitely not good for you. On social media, and I love social media. So I can speak ad nauseum about the pros and the cons here, right? But on social media, I need people to be more conscious of what are you ingesting? What are you sharing? What do you like, sharing, subscribing to? Real talk. Because we know how algorithms work, especially if you're on TikTok. They have read your brain. It's so scary. You need to understand that the amount of stuff that you're being pushed once you start clicking on things, it's reprogramming a lot, or it's reinforcing like a silo. Is something bias, confirmation bias. That's not helping. That it's not helping. You have to hear a lot of different sides. You have to know what frankly, you need to know what you're up against. I hate the fact that so many people are not aware of local politics. I beat this drum to the hills. I need you to know, when those taxes go up, and a lot of that ain't federal stuff. So I need you to be paying attention to your local news organizations. Meanwhile, local news has been getting gutted like a fish regularly. And it's painful to watch it because I'm like, but we need them. We need Black voices on there in particular. Yes, but we definitely need local news to be strong. And if y'all knew how scarce in some of the moderate size cities, granted, I get you're in Chicago, I'm in DC, but I'm from Baltimore. So I've seen like the waves of the rolling layoffs. The recession has not been kind to my generation. Recessions with an S have not been kind to my generation. And that's all I've seen. But I hate the fact that folks don't pay attention to the localized news cuts. Because I hate that Sora Joy-Ann Reid lost her position at MSNBC. She's going to be all right. I've been watching her podcast already with Jackie Reed, who I worked with at BET. But I can, as a leader of like a journalism organization, she was a leader of the Baltimore version of it. I've seen countless Black faces disappear off of a TV. I've seen countless Black names disappear off the bylines on digital properties, on newspapers and the likes, and nobody wept for them. Nobody went marching in the streets for them. And it hurts because I'm like, we need these voices. Because if you don't, then the coverage will start to reflect the erasure of said voices, said communities. And like, okay, here you go. Since you're in Chicago, when I started saying, okay, this doesn't smell right, but here we go. When I started seeing Fox News quoting tenants in Chicago in favor of getting rid of the, what do you call them, cities, sanctuary city stuff. And they were like, our houses are blighted. And what about this? And, I'm sitting here like, this is the most Black faces I've seen on Fox News in a long time. And I'm in awe because I'm like, they don't normally run us unless they're either lampooning Black people or you found Black people to do pretty much conservative, right-leaning talking points. And it was just like, that should be a red flag. That should be concerning. I love the fact that when I do a career day at like a middle school and an elementary school, in their little small voices, like I'm from Baltimore, so I do my career days in Baltimore. I love the fact that the little people like, are you from, and insert the one station. And I'm like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. They're like, okay, because my mama said don't talk to them. I'm like, and your mom's very smart. I'm glad. So I don't care how deep in the hood they are. Somebody is trying to educate them on this organization, this news org is not for you, babe. They can be different, but they're not.
Right. But shouldn't, to your point about Fox, and we know that they're going to take, especially anything negative that has to have us promoting that sort of thing. And obviously it worked because you had a whole lot of Black people who were standing up, being in opposition of these poor people, and it was just kind of mind-boggling, right?
Yeah.
But shouldn't we, like our local Black mediums, shouldn't there be some collaboration about educating towards that sort of thing?
It should be, but do they have the manpower to do it? It has to fall on somebody who has the energy and frankly can exhaust themselves to do it. I volunteer and literally go into schools trying to teach media literacy and remind people that you have choices. You don't have to go just to, and let's be straight, to kids, they're not watching TV anyway, but they are consuming clips on social media. So I'm trying to steer them toward the clips from news organizations that are reputable and worth their time, worth sharing. Because those like, share, subscribes is where the money is at for a lot of these news organizations on their digital platforms. But it hurts. It hurts because you know that I just had a friend from the Atlanta Voice talk to my students, and he's an editor. I didn't hype up the fact that this is a Black press organization. He's an editor because he's doing news. That's what you need to know first. And it was like, do y'all know your local Black news organizations? Like, I'm literally sitting here, like, flexing with my like Afro like mug. I grew up on the Afro. I moved around a lot. There's been a Black press organization everywhere I've gone. Chicago, you got like what, the Chicago Defender or something like that, right?
Chicago Defender.
Yeah.
Which is the majority owners is not Black anymore.
Well, that's how BET was for a while.
Right. We have the Crusader here as well. That are having their own sense of struggle, and then of course we have WVON radio station here, which is Black owned.
I want us to hype us up. I want us to turn to us when it's time for local elections in particular. There should be no reason why access to those running for office are not stopping by said Black press organizations. I've had conversations with content creators, okay? And this is not, I love content creators, I do. But I've had conversations with content creators, podcasters, and they're like, I got an interview with the mayor. And I'm like, that's funny because a regular journalist couldn't get an interview with the mayor. So he's going for the softball. And they're like, for real? I can ask him a hard question. You could, but he's going on your show because he's looking for the softball. Dang well if he went on like insert whatever Black press organization, they gonna really hold your feet to the fire, or insert, your local news organization. They're not gonna be soft with you. But hey, look at my rotations, look at my numbers. They're gonna like expect you to be super soft. Unless it's some firebrand and that person is known for torching folks, then they probably wouldn't even ask you. So these are like, you see, they're going for the PR versus they're going for
right.
Yeah, and they're going for the viral clips. Like I got my talking points ready to go. I've trained people on how to respond to things, not politicians, but just in general, how to respond to with their talking points and stuff. So they know how to spin. They know how to work it out. And as a result of it, I actually instruct my students. I'm like, you can take it easy on regular Joe Blow on the street. A lot of times you're meeting them on their worst day of their life. So you can kind of take it easy and let them kind of explain to you how they feel, what's going on, their impressions about the system or the issue. But when you get politicians, hold their feet to the fire. They got enough finances and teams to know how to spit out their talking points.
Well, here in Chicago, we have a problem with that. I have a problem with that. Is that in our Black medium, in our Black press, politicians tend to go to them because they get the softball questions, and they tend to give them money to support them, but then they don't hold them to account and they don't ask them the important questions. So it is compromised, and it's a real problem.
It's very compromised, and it comes from, again, if you're struggling financially and you're all about like, I got to get this money, and it's not even you being like gluttonous, it's like survival. It sucks that there are too many news organizations that are compromised by finances. And frankly, what we saw with these, I feel like, I can't put a number to it, but what we saw with a lot of these like big time cuts at news organizations, it kind of shows that news organizations are trying to appear favorable in the eyes of the new administration. Like ABC News cut the craziness out of their election and political unit and Good Morning America. Like 200 people lost their jobs. Surely you could
Wow.
find places for them. 200 people. And all I'm hearing from people outside of the industry is like, oh, I heard that they had a contract for insert host of Good Morning America here. And I'm like, that's a lot of people though. 200 people. When Joy-Ann Reid signed off, I hope your viewers saw like her attempt to like really highlight her staff and say that I get that I gotta go, but these are very talented people. Why do they have to go in mass? Where's their jobs? Like, I like it when people use their platform, like I'm using right now, to advocate for those who really need to be working. We have too many journalists that are not working because they're not getting compensated enough, and they are grown adults. So they're like, you know what? I can make the same, no, I can make better money going into realms of public relations and video production and all the other things. There's money out there to be made. So you don't really get into, technically you don't get into journalism for the money, because that's just, it's going to take forever for that to happen, right? But you want them to be able to survive. I hate when I go to convention and I talk to people and they are struggling financially. They are not taking care of their dental. They are not taking care of their health. They are really just holding on to the pennies that they have. That can't be, you can't have that and expect these people to report without bias. All it takes, they can be bought so easily, sadly. They can be compromised so easily. They need to be held. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we have that a lot, and we see that every election cycle. We see that, and even when I was on mainstream radio, we took on an issue that actually got some real mileage, and it opened some real questions, because look, I never got into radio because I wanted to be on radio. I was asked to do this, and then started using the platform to deal with a certain issue, because I'm not a trained journalist, and certainly I was not trained to be a broadcaster. But we found an issue that was near and dear to me, and we started working that issue. But it got real teeth, and we started getting some results. But as a result of that, they started getting pressure from the corporate heads of those companies and the politicians, and so they had to make a decision.
Yeah.
To me, when you have an outlet and you allow for yourself to be compromised, where I look at it is, when you have the power of an outlet, you have to recognize how to use that power, that they respect you. You're not looking for them to love you, but they respect what you do, so that you can generate the revenue to keep your independence.
It's worth trying. I have yet to really see it work outside of like some of the bigger names that we're seeing right now. And keep in mind, many of them either had to build it for a long time, like Roland Martin, or they came with cash in hand because they got escorted out the door at some bigger news organization like Don Lemon. You know, if you're making $4 million a year, you can kind of stockpile for that rainy day. But, you know, I worked for TV One, News One now, right? And like, we put a lot of work into that show daily. It was on at the same time as Good Morning America, Today Show, and all other stuff like that. So it was kind of like reminding people like, hey, we're on the same way, you know, auntie and uncle, same way y'all want to tune into the Tom Joyner Morning Show. Can you tune into this too? Like, find your way to us. We need you to watch us. We need you to support us. We need you to also share to your networks. But it's like, it's a fight. So the people who can survive as independents, it's a long, very lonely road. You almost have to be a kept person. Somebody in that house has to be able to take care of the basic doctor bills and benefits and dental and stuff like that. We can't lie to ourselves and like unicorn status. If you dream it, it happens. No, like you have to make it happen. And that's a lot of sacrifice. I love seeing the production quality, by the way. I think COVID became like, as much as I hated the pandemic, COVID became the best Black press programming I have ever seen. that Black press stuff, as well as Black content creation, I was in love because people were starting to realize like, okay, so if I set my computer up and if I get on a Zoom with my friends, we can have a talk show. I'm like, whatever. I love it. I want to hear more Black voices. I never heard your voice until Dorothy said, hey, do you know this person? I'm like, so I went and checked you out before I said yes to this. So like, I want more of this because the erasure cannot happen. It is 2025. I do not need anybody walking us back into the civil rights movement, walking us back into the Reconstruction era, walking us back into chattel slavery. It can't happen. So I need us to constantly be vocal, and I need a diversity of our voices because your lived experience is not mine, but they're both valid, you know?
Right. I mean, and I believe that we have to tie ourselves together as a web. Some of us are going to have millions of followers. Some of us are going to have thousands of followers. But I believe that every one of them certainly have to have the content. See, I believe in programming. I've always said that I don't care who you are, but when you have an outlet, you have a responsibility to providing facts and factual information. As you started out talking about people, because opinions go many different ways. But as someone who is a trained lawyer, an opinion has to be rooted in some facts.
You'd like it
to
be. Like,
you would like it to be, right? Yeah. It's supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
And to know the difference. And so to try to get people to read, and just because you read something because it's on some outlet does not mean that it is facts. I have this saying that your feelings are not facts and your thoughts are not the truth. The truth is the truth, and you got to go find it.
That is very accurate. Or my favorite is, it's on the internet, so it must be true. No, it's no. Even Meg Thee Stallion tried to tell people like, stay away from the posts that have the really big block text. They tend to be like, very tabloidy. And it's so weird because I remember being a kid, and when you go to the grocery store, those crazy magazines right there on the end cap of the cashier, you knew those were tabloids. Right. But somehow in perusing and surfing the, all scrolling, death scrolling these days, right? Or doom scrolling, you can't tell that this is pretty much made up information. I done seen so many things where I'm like, somebody needs to get sued. Like, real talk. It can't just be like, well, it's on y'all to figure out if it's a fact. True, but after a while, if you're platforming a bunch of fallacies, somebody needs to get sued. They done made poor Simone Biles pregnant a gazillion different times at this point. I'm like, leave that girl alone. Like, facts. Can we have facts?
Right.
And frankly, at a time when I don't know what we want to call it. It's not the State of the Union, but it was like a joint session of Congress where you had Representative Al Green stand up with his cane and, shaking his cane and saying, Arr! And I'm like, and this is a great Black press moment, y'all, because I know exactly how this is about to be portrayed. And I can also speak to, I know how I would have had to fight in the newsroom to be like, okay, but hear me out though. Strom Thurmond. Remember that? I was like, hold up. They knew. Like, I'm young and I'm telling you, I remember he was like, you lie. Nobody said anything. Marjorie Taylor Greene out here yelling. Like, people are constantly yelling, but let this older Black gentleman with his, I ain't gonna lie, I was like, I need more pimp canes in my life. With his cane, like, I'm like, I'm here for it. I like it. This is a good story. Now the attention's on him. And what is he upset about? He's talking about medical care, Medicare, or whatever, for his people in the Texas area. Now we're paying attention to it, and we can make it a blackity black story. We don't have to like centralize, well, how does it affect flyover country? How does it affect white people? You have the Black press. It's right there in the name. You can focus on Black people. I love it.
Well, and I was really kind of disappointed as how he was not portrayed and protected by the Black media and the Black press, right?
I mean, Roland did some good stuff with him.
Roland did some good stuff, but that's why, like you were saying, is more of us need to be doing that. We have to kind of wrap our arms around that because we know that our survival in this, or certainly our people who are, I don't do this for a living, right? Yeah. But we have people who are doing it for a living, and it's important. And we want to make sure that those people, as you say, are supported so that they can get out and do the work that they have been trained to do and that they have the ability to do to get the information out to us on a much broader basis.
And I love Black people and I love our online conversations, but I swear sometimes you would think that we couldn't walk and chew gum at the same time. Because,
Yes.
okay, Jasmine Crockett in a TikTok video. Okay, you weren't feeling the TikTok video. Did that have to really be like a long, convoluted debate? I'm like, how about the fact that she's getting the attention of disenchanted voters? Can we go there? Like, there's just so many conversations to be had, but it's like, depending on what social media network you were on will determine the conversation you have. And I've done so many workshops on like, know where your audience is. So yes, on Facebook, it's Auntie Con. It's like, it might as well be Essence Fest on that boy. And it's going to be a whole bunch of like, Stacey Adams shoes and suits. And it's the boomers. It's the Xers and the boomers right there. So their conversation might kind of reek of a little bit of respectability politics as a result of it. Okay. Instagram conversation, like, oh, you know what? That was cute. I don't know what you need to do, but that was cute. Like the conversation shifts as you identify the different audiences. And I do feel like news organizations, to stay relevant, need to find their way to the different audiences and make sure you're attached. You're becoming part of the conversation. You can't wait for them to come to you, especially if you're on like traditional television or terrestrial radio. You're going to be waiting forever. You got to go where the audience is. And if you're trying to skew your audience, it comes down to who has the money. Let's not lie. But let's say you want to like attract a Gen Z audience. You better find your way to TikTok and possibly find your way to Discord or Twitch. I don't know. Like you have to find your way to where they are to engage them, or you will die on the vine with whatever generation you're already identifying yourself as. That's your key consumer.
Don't we need to see, or maybe we do, don't we need to see more people or Black people in positions of news directors?
Yeah, and there are incubators. Like, don't sleep on it. We got a lot of initiatives, especially through, I'm not representing NABJ today, but we have a lot of like managerial incubators out there that are targeting. We need more management of color, but Black folks. Okay, we need more Black news directors. Yes, we need everybody, but I am not going to be apologetic. I'm unapologetically Black. So yeah, we need more Black ones. I'm proud that I have like a classmate that's was a news director for a long time. And then to see like more and more of us taking the reins, whether it's a small station in Tallahassee or a big station in Washington, D.C. I am so proud. We need those. And it can't be the only one. It can't be, we got 5. It needs to be like a deluge, a tsunami of Black managers, because it really has to be somebody who's going to be fully supported. You can't leave them out there to fight this fight by themselves. I'm very protective of Black news managers. I am a whole manager myself, but it's like, I'm very protective of their existence. They can't be left like, oh, well, he got that position, so he got it. Know that any Black person in a high position of power has slings and arrows coming straight at their heads regularly. And I don't know what that phrase is, something about if you shoot for the king, you best not miss or something. They are, though the naysayers of the why are you here, why do you deserve this position, they are constantly coming at these people. So you need to be protecting them as they ascend to these positions. And they need to understand that their position with great power comes great responsibility. It doesn't mean that they're going to go out and hire a whole ton of Black people, but it does. I'd rather them be more protective of like, what is the coverage about to look like? Are you about to be embarrassed in the community that you call yourself covering? Are people going to like, say, are little kids going to say, don't talk to these people? It's a travesty, by the way, what I've seen happen in Baltimore to the newspaper of record has gotten taken over by, how we were talking about, there's some news organizations that are owned by like one conservative one. Yeah, so they took over the Baltimore Sun. It hurts. It hurts to watch that. I'm not saying that the Baltimore Sun was ever perfect, but it really hurts watching the shift get so extreme. It really hurts watching the mass exodus of folks who are at this legacy news organization say, no, we out. I'm not doing this. And go to a non-traditional property that's doing well, like leaps and bounds. I feel confident. I'm happy. I know the managers over there. I'm happy to see that. But it hurts to see that they just really, it's just, and then when you find out there's a Black guy involved in that, you're just like we're not going to claim him. We just going to leave that alone.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think, where do you think that the core of the problem is in your judgment and in your experience? What do you think the core of the problem is, and how can we fix it?
It's money. While it's the root of all evil, it's like Black press organizations can hardly sustain themselves as independent entities, and they rely so heavily on, well, who can throw us financing? And as a result, that's why a lot of your historically Black newspapers, it seems like it's like the Boule Patrol or something like, okay, who had a dinner? Who had a tea? Who had, like, it's very lifestylesy. And people just forget that they are actually covering real stories, y'all. Like, please click on those, like, share, subscribe, please. Like, do those too. But it really hurts because like they are so held to the, I need to be paid for this. Some of our favorites are struggling to pay for their staffs. And it, you know, it gets annoying when you say, okay, you know, my Venmo, my Zelle, my Cash App, whatever, you know, you get annoyed hearing that. But in the end, it's money. They need money so that they can do a quality journalism product, or if it's a public affairs program, a quality public affairs program product, they need the money. Outside of that, the devotion is there. There are people who are independently, as you see, doing their best to offer platforms, and they're growing their platforms, and I love it. But I hate the fact that it's not sustainable. And the reason it's not sustainable because, I mean, again, like mortgages got to be paid.
Mortgages got to be paid, and yes,
yeah.
yes.
And don't get sued. Don't get sued. Oh, you done.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it almost seems like we need to have, and I know that there are people who probably have tried it, but we still need to find a way to undergird this with financing, and it almost has to be where we can have some sort of national subscription to, you know, maybe led by National Association of Black Journalists or something, where we can self-fund or certainly have a fund to fund our Black journalists, producers, directors, and that sort of thing, and so that we can build that kind of strength and independence.
Well, there is something right now that's called a fledgling state, you know, from via NABJ, as far as I know, it's still here. Black News and Views. And it's like, it is a website, it's a digital property, but the stories are meaty, they're nationally provoking, extending. And in some cases, they're like in the hubs of these Black metropolitans like Detroit, Chicago, DC, but they're all freelancers, okay? So as great as the content is, I know Melanie Eversley works really hard with her staff, but again, it's freelance. It's great content, but I can't see anybody sustaining themselves off of freelance content. I was a freelancer for such a long time that eventually I learned the only way that this is going to really work is if I have a stable 9-to-5, and then I can freelance. But I can't freelance full time. I need to be a kept woman to do that. Somebody needs to have a full-time job with benefits. So that's what keeps a lot of, again, it comes down to, you know, money. You know, somebody needs to have that sustainability. NABJ does have that as a resource. So if any of your viewers are interested in like possibly writing for a national news organization that is powered by Black journalists who have, you know, they have the prestige, they have the reputation, you'll go far, then that is definitely one. But otherwise, they struggle to offer something sustainable and a livable amount to live on. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm like stumbling, but you get the idea.
Yeah, we got to figure this out. Well, listen, I certainly appreciate you coming on, Nicki Mayo. Tell the people how they can to follow you and follow your work and get in touch with you.
Yeah, I try to be very consistent. So I am Nicki Mayo News. You see that right there. Anytime you want to like find me on every social media network, that is literally my handle. Also very active on like LinkedIn by my name, of course. And I do have a website, NickiMayoNews.com. I suppose outside of journalism, I do specialize in like nonprofits, mom and pop shop and civic organizations, and faith-based groups, helping them do their like social media networking and campaigns and the likes, as well as video production and podcasting.
All right, fantastic. Thank you very much for coming on with me. Look, you got to come back and sit with me and talk again. I want to do a roundtable. We were trying to put together a roundtable, but I certainly want to do a roundtable about this issue because I think we have to have more of these conversations, but we certainly have to try to figure out this financial piece because we certainly have to have Black voices in these spaces, but we also have to have, you know, people in these managerial positions because you can't. I think that you can't just have the journalists or there without having some people who are making the decisions at the top as well to support that.
Leadership is crucial.
All right, Nicki Mayo, thank you so much.
Bye, y'all.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on, being with me. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Okay. All right, folks. Nicki, Mayo, thank you so much for joining us. Listen, it's a real challenge. It is a real challenge. But I am not, again, I'm not a journalist. I'm not a reporter, but I have worked with enough of them and work with them and have conversations with them and still talk with them to understand what these challenges are. We need to have them in these places of mainstream media. They can't do certain things and say certain things, but we have to have ways to support them. And the way that we can support them is to make sure that we are watching them on these particular outlets, so that when those times do come, when the companies decide, well, we have to cut back, that they're not cutting the people that we need to have there, because there has to be somebody there in place that is writing and telling about the issues that impact our communities. And all white outlets can't do that and won't do that, will not do that. Even if they could, they will not do that. So we have to make sure that we have people from our communities in place. And the way that we have them in place is to make sure that we watch them. That's the one thing we can do, especially in mainstream media. Now, this other part, in terms of how we figure out how to support the our local and smaller outlets, like here we have the Chicago Defender. Again, the Chicago Defender is majority owned by a white corporation, and that happened because of the way that unfortunately the inheritance, they had a big huge inheritance that they had to pay, which was north of $5 million. We were actually involved in that because of some unfortunate lack of communication. That deal didn't happen, and they had to end it up selling off of the majority interest of the paper in order for it to stand. But that, is another story. But you have the Dorothy Benoit, the Crusader, but we do need to make sure that we support our own. One of the other things is of course, we need to make sure, and in those outlets that we have, we need to make sure, as she was saying, that they have to put out a good product, and then have to figure out how to maneuver ourselves through this social media outlets that is an ever evolving and an ever moving system that you have to play into. I know that it's very hard, and again, there are people who are able to do it because they don't rely on it for the income. I worked at WVON. I started off, was supposed to be doing one show a week, and it ended up being 6 days a week. I worked there doing a show for a little over 10 years. I never received $1, not a dollar. And because that was not the intentions for actually doing it. When we found that we had a situation with relative to red light cameras, and then later speed cameras, which I'm going to tell you about some things that we're working on now. Going to be doing a story with some things that we have found out, some new information that we found out that is, we think that is going to be hard driving on speed cameras. And of course, Mayor Brandon Johnson, who said, like many other people who are running for public office, said that they were going to do about the speed cameras, but we found out some information that is going to further challenge the credibility of that, and challenge the mayor to do something about them. I'm not going to go into the details of it now, but we are working hard on putting that together. So I'll tell you more about that in the coming weeks. And so stay tuned for that. So, but this whole situation about the you know, blacks in the mainstream outlet, and again, like she said, Joy Reid being fired. Look, Joy Reid made $3 million a year, and she was there for more than 5 years. So I'm sure Joy Reid is she's not going to be in the soup line or anything like that. But beyond that, and of course, again, when you start talking about the money aspect of it, people do have to make a living. People do have to take care of themselves, and to be able to provide for themselves. But we have to make sure that when we do have people who are in positions, whether it's locally, whether it's on a national level, as a Black community, we have got to realize that we cannot operate in silos. We have to have a collective approach to whatever it is that we are doing. This ideology about this individualistic or individualism does not work for minority groups. And we are one of the only minority groups, when I say minority, I'm talking about in numbers, that we have a real issue in working together. And sometimes you don't even have to do anything per se or say anything. Showing up is being very vocal. Showing up is a very powerful tool if you just show up. But we have to do that on a very wide margin. We have to sometimes what they call soft support. And there's other times when there is hard support. That soft support is, you might be in a sensitive position. You may be in a position that you cannot be as vocal, but you can be supportive. You can be supportive. You can provide information to those who can be a little more forceful because they're independent and they're not in positions where they have to really be careful per se. I don't have to be careful to say anything, because I don't have any economic dependency on anyone. No, not government, not any particular outlet. I don't worry about political blowback on anything that we may be working on or anybody that I don't care who it is. If you are serving in a public position, Black, white, Hispanic, male or female, Democrat or Republican, I'm a Democrat, a proud Democrat. I am going to hold Democrats to account just as hard. Conservatives, Republicans, you can say whatever you want to say about them. You're not going to hurt their feelings because they don't care about you. They don't care about, because they don't govern towards our communities. That's not what they're about. So the party and the people that we are mostly tied to and that we have to deal with are the Democrats. So we need to hold them to an account. I believe that we have to mount ourselves up. We have to organize ourselves to infiltrate the Democratic Party, to give the Democratic Party a resuscitation, because the Democratic Party has a lot of problems. But just like your vehicle, your car that you have, if something goes wrong with your car, you don't just go out and buy a brand new car. You take the car and take it to your mechanic and get whatever the parts replaced that need to be replaced, or whatever parts that need to be repaired, so that the whole car runs better. That's what I believe that those of us who are Democrats, if you're not a Democrat, this conversation is not for you. And I'm not trying to convince you. But those of us who are Democrats and those of us who understand what the Democratic Party means and should be, then we have to put ourselves together so that we can make that party work better. And I'm talking about here locally. I'm talking about here locally in Chicago and Cook County in the state of Illinois, because that's what drives your national politics. You elect your representatives locally. You elect your state reps. You elect your state senators. You elect your United States congresspeople. You elect your United States senators. So you elect your federal representatives on a local basis. So therefore, we should be organizing ourselves together so that we can have the kind of power to influence, to install, and to remove people from these spaces. That is where you have real power. You don't have real power just because you might be a bright person or you might have a lot of information. That's not power. You have to have the threat to be able to say to a certain office or a position that we can put somebody in a position just as well as we can take them out of a position. That is real political power. And we have not amassed that on a level that it can be respected. That's where we have to be. And not falling off into what I see some people falling off into, falling for misinformation because they're angry, and they go and jump into these spaces that they have jumped into. Because those of you who thought that supporting what you have now in leadership, that you now have buyer's remorse for, or those who are saying that they're surprised that this is happening, I don't know why you're surprised. I have no idea why you're surprised, because they told you what they were going to do. They showed you what they were going to do. This is not what you can say, oh, I'm surprised. No, you can't say that you're surprised. You can't. None of this is a surprise. They told you what they were going to do, and they're doing what they said they were going to do and more. So if they told you that they were going to do what they were doing or going to do, and you didn't believe them, you had to know that they were going to go and try to do even more crazier things that they're doing, and they are. Now, are they going to fall on a sword? Without a doubt, they will fall on a sword. In my mind, they will fall on their own sword. There's a scripture in the Bible that says that when you are setting up a trap for somebody else, it says that they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had constructed for Mordecai. Be careful of the traps, and just watch the traps that others are trying to set up for somebody else's demise. Be careful trying to set traps up for other people to fall, because there are those who like to waller in the shortcomings or the failures or the falling or the collapses of other people. They celebrate in that, and some people participate in trying to set that up. Don't get caught up. Don't get caught up in that. But I would tell you this. I would get out of their way and let them fall on their own swords. Let them fall on their own swords. But I can tell you what we should be doing. is we should continue, or certainly should start if you haven't started. We need to start putting ourselves together, organizing ourselves together so that we can impact and that we can challenge the people in our local political offices. That means your school boards, your municipal elections, meaning your mayor, your city councils. If you're in the suburbs, your mayor, your trustees. These are the areas that we need to be involved in. We need to be involved in holding to account the people who are at the commissioners level, the Cook County Board level. I told you about this person, Junior, that everybody thought was some kind of advocate for our communities. He is not. He is a part of the problem, a big part of the problem. You are paying, on average, every one of you who own a home, if you own a home in the 2nd District on the south side of Chicago, in the southern suburbs, you are paying every year, you are paying an average of $1,000, it may be more, and in the suburbs, it's even higher. Because of one reason, because Larry Rogers Jr. and George Cardenas, the 2 of the 3 Board of Review commissioners, continue to lavish tax appeal attorneys who represent commercial property owners in the downtown area that buy properties, and then they get their taxes reduced at half of the assessment of the values of those properties. Those taxes don't go away. They shift. So they've shifted more than $800 million a year in real estate taxes from commercial property owners, giving people who don't need the subsidies, and putting them on the backs of homeowners in the 2nd District. So that $800 million shift goes to homeowners. So if you're a homeowner, if you're a property owner on the south, in the south suburbs, because that's the second, largely made up of the 2nd District that Larry Rogers Jr. is the Board of Review commissioner of, Larry Rogers Jr. single-handedly, along with George Cardenas, is putting on us. We are paying, on average, some are paying higher, on average, any property owner, an average of $1,000 more a year in your real estate taxes, subsidizing the tax deals or tax cuts that they are giving to property owners downtown. Now, how have they gotten away with this? Largely because the Board of Review's office is one of those innocuous offices that most people don't know what the heck that they're doing, or that it even exists. But there are 3 seats, 3 people down there. Now, while we are working to get that information out so that more people are aware of what's going on, and we didn't have enough firepower to get it out this last election, so people elected Larry Rogers Jr. because they thought that he was the better guy. I mean, I've talked to people who are property owners, that are lawyers, that are even some judges, who was not aware of what Larry Rogers Jr. and George Cardenas, which all came up under the Barrios regime. Larry Rogers Jr. was installed by Barrios. Barrios went to be the assessor. He came from the Board of Review, and he handpicked Larry Rogers Jr. to be his replacement. Larry Rogers Jr. came in as the so-called reformer, but of course, Larry Rogers Jr. fell right in line. Now, the two-headed beast who made the most money for tax appeals in Chicago and Cook County, they're gone now. Doesn't mean that their clients are gone. Ed Burke and Michael Madigan. They were two of the largest property tax appeal attorneys for commercial property owners downtown. As a matter of fact, Ed Burke represented Trump Tower that got millions of dollars in tax cuts that you and I, every property owner in the second district, is subsidizing. That's what happened out in Country Club Hills when they brought Walmart and gave Walmart the big $80 million tax abatement. They didn't understand what that meant. An abatement doesn't mean that it goes away. It means that they don't pay it, but somebody else is going to pay it. So they take it from the homeowners. So the homeowners out in that area ended up with already high taxes, ended up with special assessments from $15,000 to $20,000 in special assessments to pay for the abatement that was given to Walmart. When Walmart's tax abatement period ended, you know what they did? They folded up their tent and they left, as they always do. The same thing that they did over here on 83rd in South Holland. After their tax abatements were done, because you only get them for a certain period of time, after they've been exhausted, they pack up and leave. That's why I've never shopped at a Walmart. Never even been in a store of a Walmart. Don't even know what they look like. Because I've never appreciated the inequities that that family represents. Walmart won't even insure its managerial staff at their stores. They'll put life insurance on them that the company gets. And of course, they had to stop doing that when the story broke about these corporations that were buying life insurance policies on some of their upper management without even letting them know. But that was for the benefit of the corporation and not for the family. Walmart had had a man who had passed away that had worked for their corporation, and the family went to Walmart to ask for assistance. They wouldn't even give them assistance. But Walmart had a life insurance policy on them, which Walmart got paid on the life insurance policy, but they wouldn't help the family. Those are the kind of things that go on. Those are the kind of things that we need to be apprised of. Not some of this other nonsense that we get involved in, trying to make somebody else look bad. If you're not trying to do something that is helping someone else, keep your mouth shut. Nobody wants to hear it. If all you're interested in is just throwing rocks of discord, of division, nobody wants to hear that. Nobody is interested in your own depression, your own pity, whatever that is. Nobody's interested in it. Go have your own pity party. But those people who really want to work to make things better in our communities, because we have so much talent, we have so much abilities, all we have to do is bring it together. There is nothing that we cannot approach. There's nothing that we cannot deal with. We've got every possible talent that we need to organize any type of organization that we need. any function. We've got every piece that we need. All we need is for people to come together. And as people come together, in that we will find people that we could run for public office. We will find people that have the ability to write copy. We have people who have the ability to run campaigns. We have people who have the ability to do production. We have all of that. Look, even in 10 by 10 to win, we had 2 new people that came on in the last month. One is a person who retired from doing production. They did all of the media work for the company that they worked for, and now they are a part of 10 by 10 to win. And so they're doing shorts and putting together things where we can get more video clips out so that we can spread the word, do more outreach. So he's coming up with ideas with that. We have a young lady who put together the whole 10 by 10 to win presentation. She's now taking control of our website and improving the website and making it function properly. My point is that within our community, we have all of the talent, we have all of the ability that we need. This is about a collective. It is not about a personality or a person. It is about all of us. Because the idea is that we either rise all together and we work together to strengthen our community, or we all fall into where we have a stagnant community. Some of us individually are doing okay, but Black people individually have done okay, even in slavery. Not that anybody wanted to be a slave, but the house slave had privileges that the field slave did not have. So individually, we have had Black people doing well and doing okay. But that is not where the strengthening of our community comes from. The strengthening of our community comes from when we have more people participating, more people doing well. The rates of unemployment and the rates of young Black men in our community are at almost triple that of the white community in the same demographic. That just shouldn't be. Why? Because there is no plan to address that kind of situation. Why isn't there a plan to address it? Because the people who we have serving in public office are stuck. I went to a meeting 2 weeks ago that was supposed to be a town hall, but it was not a town hall. What it was State Senator, who was the committee person, LG Sims, who so-called a town hall meeting to hear from the constituents, but it wasn't a town hall meeting. It was a meeting for him to have so that he can go out and tout some of the, I guess, accomplishments that he wanted to announce. And he wanted to put up a few candidates that are going to be running for office in these upcoming elections. That was not a town hall meeting. And I told him that all he had to do was to send out, a pamphlet for that. That wasn't what a town hall meeting was. Then I started saying to him, look, the Illinois Black Caucus, it seems to me that it would be a good idea that we had a real town hall meeting with the Illinois Black Caucus and the Black community so that we could have a real conversations about things of a concern and to see what kind of plans that you all collectively can be working on. You know what he said to me? He said, well, if it's not good for the 17th, because that's my first priority. That kind of narrow thinking is what will keep our communities from advancing. And we as a body of people, we as the public, we as the voting public, we must change that kind of attitude. There has to be a complete new progressive mindset on a holistic level to address these concerns that have been plaguing our communities for far too long. Not that they can't be fixed, but we have to fix what is broken. And fix what's broken is that we have to put people in place that have a much more open mind to address these issues. First of all, we have to have people in these positions who are willing to work together collectively as well. You can't have a state representative who says, well, you know, I'm going to focus on my district, when in fact they vote on policies that impact the whole. So that there needs to be a regional thinking and a collective will to work together. So, you know, I don't live in South Shore anymore. I moved. I now live in the Chatham area. And I live right next door to LG Sims. And I told him what I thought about that meeting, which was not a town hall meeting. But my point is not really to talk to them. My point is for us to get together. We are the ones, we are the problem. Why do I say that we're the problem? We are the problem is because we know what is happening and we continue to allow for it to happen. So that means that we're the problem. And if we are not willing to fix the problem, then it is us. Cliff Kelly used to always say, you get the government that you deserve. Meaning that if you didn't do anything to change or to make sure that the right people got into these public spaces, then you got what you deserve. Those of you who thought that, you know, this whole Trump nonsense was the better alternative, whatever is happening, you get what you deserve. Because that's what you put there. You get what you deserve. So in order for us to make the kind of changes that we need to see, then we have to make the change ourselves internally. Look, thank you all for tuning in to the Monday night edition of the People's Show. Thank Nicki Mayo for coming on. We were supposed to have Eric Deggans, and maybe he'll be on with us next week. He's also a well-noted independent journalist, multimedia journalist. But we need to continue that conversation, but we need to figure out ways how we can fix that as well. More importantly, I want to ask you to join us this Thursday night for our weekly 10 by 10 to win meeting. You can text 10x10 to the number 855-909-1385, or you can get the Zoom link that I will post on Facebook, and you can join us on Thursday. And we got some good things coming up that you will find very, very interesting. Thank you all for tuning in to the program. Thank you, Brother Earl Winfrey over at intellectualradio.com for this space. And I look forward to seeing you all right back here next week. Same time, same place, and we'll have some new guests for you. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a good night.